Hey everybody, Mark again with Exotic Car Playplace. Today I'm going to share with you the top 5 worst BMWs of all time. Some of the reasons they're the worst are because of the drivetrain they came with. Some of the reasons are because they were extremely unreliable. And some of the reasons are because they were just plain ugly. So let's get down to the top 5 worst BMWs of all time. The first worst BMW in history goes to, and this should be of no surprise, the E65 7 Series BMW that was produced from 2001 to 2008. Why was this such a bad car? Well, there's so many countless reports. This car was so unreliable. You had problems with coils, electronic, the computer systems, window trims of all sorts were starting to come apart. Wheel bearings with relatively low miles on them were letting go in some cases. The plastics on the cooling system crumbling, and therefore you'd wind up with a lot of repairs around the coolant. You'd have leaks, you'd have oil leaks, a lot of electronic problems. You'd have issues with some of the iDrive system because that was very early generation. You had way too complex a system when it came to, electronically adjusting your seats and your controls on the stocks. Way too complex, way too many problems. Mechanics hated these cars, owners hated these cars, and reported the fact that they spent countless dozens of hours on one silly little repair at times just because access was a real problem for these cars. They were brutal, and this was arguably the worst BMW in BMW history. So the second worst BMW in history, and some might argue with this one because a lot of people liked it for its cuteness and its uniqueness, and that goes to the 1955 to the 1962 Bmw Isetta. That is that little three-wheeler car that had a single-cylinder, 13 horsepower car. Is this the ultimate driving machine? I think not, because most BMWs, when you talk about quantifying its performance, you talk about 0 to 60 times of X amount of seconds. Well, this car, you can't compute 0 to 60 because it won't even make 60 miles per hour. As a matter of fact, its top speed is 53 miles per hour. And that may be actually okay because in essence, with 53 miles per hour as a top speed, much faster than that because it only had 3 wheels, you might experience severe speed wobble, which could send you into a world of hurt, into a ditch somewhere. The last thing you wanted to do. Like I said, great collector car, very awkward, and not really in the true essence of the ultimate driving machine. The third worst sets of vehicles in the family of BMWs goes to the 120, 320, 520D. What's common? It's the N47 engine. It's the little 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine that had a multitude of issues that were not necessarily characteristic for a high-quality BMW, but the single biggest and worst issue that N47 engine produced was timing chains were breaking. And a lot of the timing chains were breaking with relatively low kilometers. The worst part of that is, if you don't know what a timing chain actually does, let me share a little knowledge here, guys. The timing chain is basically that piece of gear train that aligns your pistons and your valves so that they run in perfect sequence. If your valve timing does not work properly, you can have pistons and valves colliding and you have an engine that goes boom! And the worst part, to actually compound that issue, the timing chain access on these engines was actually at the back, at the firewall of these cars. So you pretty much had to pull the engine out of the car to gain proper access. This made it a very undesirable set of vehicles to own. The 120, 320, 520Ds, there was even engines used in some of the Minis, and some of the X series of the BMWs actually utilized this as well. And these were in that 2006 up to 2011 range. So look out for those cars, not some of the better cars that BMW's ever produced. And the fourth worst BMW in history, in my opinion, of course, some people like them for just that reason, falls under the 2009 to 2017 BMW 5 Series GT cars. GT for Gran Turismo. Well, this was sort of a hybrid between the 5 Series coupe or the 5 Series sedan and a hatchback car that you might find even comparable to an SUV. So you had sort of an SUV, sedan, crossover, and they made this sport vehicle that was just ugly. As a matter of fact, it had the kind of looks that its parents wouldn't even feed its kid with a slingshot. It didn't even want to get that close to it. So anyway, as a matter of fact, other than that, the looks, a lot of the features were loved by a lot of owners. There were, unfortunately, some issues with it because the complexities were higher in this car. It actually was not a 5 Series car. It was, in fact, truly based on a 7 Series platform, which unfortunately had a lot of the extra complexities associated with the 7 Series cars, and therefore you had additional electronic issues like the iDrive screen that you could find problems with that. Sometimes there was issues with the windows and the mechanisms. Some of the other electronics there were issues with. So overall, it was more electrical that you typically found problems with, but overall, the issue with this car was its looks. And rounding out our list to the top 5 worst BMWs of all time goes to the Bmw i3, the hybrid car, the economy hybrid car. Why was that such a problem in my mind? Well, let's start with the beginning. Number 1, it had really flimsy tires. The kind of tires that were actually specifically designed for that car to be extra flimsy, lightweight, and support fuel economy. Less rolling resistance equals better fuel economy. Well, unfortunately, it was a really flimsy tire, and a lot of owners found problems with these tires going flat, popping, or what have you. To compound that issue, they were not only not a run flat, but BMW did not even provide a spare tire available for that car in the name of saving weight. So that in itself was a problem. Now there's also been problems associated with programming of the system in the computer of that car. Because where on one hand you can be driving along and you see the range available on your electrical system being very low, and you'd expect for the gas engine to pick up the pace, when in actuality it allows the system to deplete so far that the gas engine still doesn't have the opportunity to catch up. As well, not only that, the car, they suggest that you actually drive it at less than 50 kilometers per hour when on gas. Unfortunately, this car some of those bugs aren't entirely worked out, and sometimes it might be a question of communication to owners or programming on the system to ensure that people don't have that situation and not suffer from range anxiety. Another issue with it is its many recalls. Unfortunately, with new technology comes new issues. And so it also has some technology-based issues, recalls that are actually safety related, such as airbags that don't deploy, engine mounts that come loose, and fuel leaks. As a result of loose engine mounts and all kinds of other issues, you actually have leaking fuel in some cases on your little auxiliary gasoline motor. So many owners actually basically just call this a $57,000 glorified street legal golf cart. And unfortunately, it's a very expensive one at that. Pretty, but expensive. And so does this qualify as the latest and the greatest ultimate driving machine? Not so sure about that. Let's try to get some of those bugs worked out, but for now, the i3 seems to have a few glitches, which makes my list. So everybody, thanks again for sticking around, listening to the list. If you have any others that you think should fall under that list, give me a shout. Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to share with your friends and subscribe to my channel. Love to see you guys real soon. See you then. Bye-bye.